Welcome to New Branch Community Church. We're glad that you are here today, and we are in a series called Follow, and we've been taking a look at what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And over the last several weeks, we've been discovering what that actually means, that for some of us, we were raised maybe where we went to church, and it was kind of like, hey, church was there to kind of judge you. I don't know if you ever felt like that, like, hey, if you do live right, you're allowed to come here, and until you do, don't bother even coming kind of thing. And but what we found is Jesus taught something quite a bit different. That Jesus actually taught, hey, come follow me, and then you'll change. It doesn't mean that change isn't important, but sometimes you have to have that lag that goes, hey, before I believe right and behave right, could I try it? Could I discover some things about Jesus? And we found during the series, not just because of what I've been saying, but because of his very words, that as he called his apostles, he said, hey, come check this out before you believe right, before you behave right. And we said we've discovered many things about him. Last Sunday, though, we talked about something, and I'll see how many people remember. We said, hey, in order to remember to pray, we said we used an acronym last Sunday. How many people remember the acronym? Yeah, you can say it. Go ahead. I can just go on all over the place. Yeah, Chick Flick PG. And so I just want to make sure we explain that correctly because I got a lot of people that didn't get what we were talking about. They've been inviting me to Chick Flicks all week, and I went, I'm sorry, that's not the point of the message. I hate chick flicks. Please stop inviting me. I'm not going to go. I can't stand them. I watch them with Marie when I have to, but I'm not watching them with anybody else. But we said, hey, what does chick flick PG mean? We said, hey, Jesus said, a new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. And then we talked about what does a Jesus follower wear? Have you ever had anybody ask you what a Jesus follower wears? Sarah, with the cowboy hat? I'm just playing. What does a Jesus follower, I'm so sorry. What does a Jesus follower wear? That's cool. I can't pull it off, but that's awesome. What does a Jesus follower wear? And what we found was this, is that we said, hey, remember Chick Flick PG, compassion and kindness and humility. And we said, man, none of those things come natural, right? That compassion and kindness and humility and love and patience. And we went, man, we can't do that in our own strength. So we had to go, hey, you experience God first. And what we saw in the verse is that the love of God comes into our life, and the outpouring is these things that we put on. And we're able to put those on because of Christ. And we said, hey, remember Chick Flick PG, right? Remember every day read that acronym and say, man, am I putting that on? Am I putting on kindness and patience? And that's what it means to be his follower. If you missed any of that, newbranch.net is our website. Check that out. The entire Follow series is there, along with lots of new things on our website, so please check that out. And if you fall asleep today, or you go, hey, not just fall asleep, but maybe you say, hey, I got somebody that needs this, and I want to be able to share it. The website's there. We also have CDs available in the lobby. Just want to make sure you know about that. And today, though, we're going to talk about what is the cost for following. And some of you guys are going, you finally got to where I thought you were going to go. There's some fine print. You ever seen the fine print? You ever watch one of those commercials and it's kind of like they, it's like, hey, take this drug. It's going to be great for you. It's going to help your depression. And then at the very end, they give the fine print, where they say it 1,000 miles an hour, and you actually listen to the fine print once and you went, I'll never take that because I'm trading one problem with this other horrible stuff that they're talking about could happen to me. What's the fine print? What's the fine print in following? I've been thinking a lot about fine print for me because Marie's been saying, hey, I know you want to do a lot of high-risk activities. You need to increase your life insurance. Plus, you're getting older. You need to do that. And so I'm going through the process, and that's a process, man. I don't know if you ever contacted the life insurance company, but they put you through the ringer. It's like, hey, they come out, they take your stuff and all this, and they send you a document. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like, I'm thinking a page, 2 pages. They send you like 60 pages worth of documents. They're like, no, we'll send it in PDF. I'm like, great, I want to read through it. And you're like, I'm never going to read all that. I'll be dead before I read all that stuff. I have no idea what the fine print is. And but she said, somebody recently asked me, they said, hey, John, would you want to go skydiving with us? And I was like, I absolutely would. And Marie goes, yeah, you can go, but you better get that life insurance first. And you better check the fine print because there's a lot of ones that say, hey, if you die in a skydiving accident, you're not covered. And she said, you're not going if that's the case, but if it is the case, you are welcome to go. So they said they would cover it, and I'm willing to go. So if you want to sign up for a skydiving trip, we're ready to go. Marie said she doesn't care if I make it or not at this point. It was fine. I'm just playing. She wants me to make it. But you got to read the fine print, and for some people, they're going, hey, what is the cost of following Jesus? Some people say there's no cost to following Jesus, and that's not true. Jesus is about to tell us through his word what the cost of being his follower is. And he didn't want anybody to be surprised. He didn't do one of these things where he said, here's a 60-page document in a 6 font. You know what I'm talking about? Where you look at it and you're like, I can't read that. Even with my reading glasses, I can't see it, He didn't do that. You know what he did? He said, I want to be clear. about what the cost is of following me. And he explains it to his disciples. So if you want to turn with me, Mark chapter 8, we're going to talk about what is the cost, what is the fine print in following Jesus. He's about to explain it. Mark chapter 8 and verse 27, while you're turning there or looking it up on your app, I would highly recommend the U version of the Bible. If you don't have that, really download it to your phone. Absolutely awesome. Go to Google Play Store, just type in the Bible app or the U version, and it's absolutely amazing. Most used version of the Bible on the planet. I think 200 million people have downloaded it. Absolutely awesome. Okay, Mark chapter 8, verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on to the village around Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked them, so let me just kind of set up where he's at here. He is traveling, and because he does miracles and because he had started his ministry, lots of people were flocking around Jesus, even in ancient times. So you got to think it's been over 2,000 years. So Jesus is back then, and he's walking around, and even in ancient times, he has thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that flock to him wherever he goes. So think about it. They had went from being obscure fishermen, some of them tax collectors, nobody liked them, to now following Jesus, and their life now is very popular. You know what I mean? When they walk into town, everybody wants to see Jesus. Everybody likes his communicating. No, well, not everybody, but most of the people, and they all want to see him, and he does miracles, so you're like a superstar. And so as they're walking, they get a moment to themselves, which is very rare with the 12 apostles, with the entourage coming behind him that follows him everywhere. And he says, "Who do people say that I am?" Great question. One thing I'll say about this question, if you decide as a leader you want to ask it, just be prepared. You may not hear what you think you'll hear. You know what I'm saying? I've asked that loaded, as a pastor, you're like, hey, you started church. Hey, what's the buzz in the community? What are people saying? You might be surprised. Hey, you're a cult. That's what they're saying. You're hyper-charismatic. You're like, what? You're a liberal, or whatever. You're like, where does this come from? You've never even been here, and you're saying, it's just kind of funny. Or even worse, sometimes you go, what are people saying? And they're going, yeah, nothing. Which you don't like to hear. Jesus knew people were talking, and he wanted to get them thinking. So think of it this way. Jesus wasn't saying this to boost his confidence. That's not a good reason to ask this. One, I think, he's like, hey, I want to get it dialogue, but he wanted them to think about, what does this mean? Think about it. Who is Jesus? And I think he wants us to think about it. Who is he? Verse 28. He's got a point to this. And they replied, some say you're John the Baptist. Okay, that's weird. John the Baptist was dead. Others say you're Elijah. Elijah hadn't been around for hundreds of years. Okay, and still others, one of the prophets. Some of them said in another place with the Gospels, the Gospels show different angles of the same story. They said, you're Moses. They're like, Moses hadn't been around in a long time. What are people thinking? They just think you're a prophet and whatever. And so he's like, that's pretty cool. But let me ask you a question, okay? Verse 29. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? That's a great question. I would ask you that question today. Who do you say that Jesus is? Who is he? And Peter spoke up right away, being the oldest apostle and being the one that was outspoken. I'm kind of like that, a verbal processor. I don't know how many people are like that. Some people have to think before they speak, and other people, that you kind of think as you speak. That's Peter. So he just lets it come out, and so what's inside of him comes out. He goes, you are the Messiah. In another place in John, I believe he says, you are the Christ, which is the same word, by the way. It means the anointed one. It means, and he goes, even takes it a step further. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He got it. Jesus is like, that's exactly it, Peter. In fact, that confession right there, he goes on to say, that confession, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Big statement. But you know what Jesus understood? You don't get it. You said it, but you don't get it. Can I tell you about most of us here today as followers of Jesus? We don't really get what he was trying to ask here. In fact, he goes on to say this. The next part of this passage in verse 30, in fact, we'll put it up here just so you can see it. Verse 30 is confusing. It always has been to me. Because here he goes, what is the statement? And in the book of John, we find out that he says, that's it, Peter. And upon this rock, in fact, it's so great of a statement that you made, I'm changing your name. His name wasn't Peter, it was Simon. And he said, from now on, you'll be known as the rock, which is Peter. Petra, that's what it means. Peter means the rock. Awesome, I get a new name. He's all blown up with ego. I know how it feels. I can relate to Peter on so many levels. And so he's sitting there feeling really good, and then Jesus says this. He warns them not to tell anyone about him. What? Your sole purpose after Jesus leaves is to tell, and he goes, but not right now. Now, for some of us, we're dumbfounded because we've been taught, and some of us come from backgrounds like this, you share the gospel and it doesn't matter the timing. Can I tell you something? That ain't true. Jesus just said, that's true. That's the point. That's why I came. That's the whole purpose of my mission. That's who I am. Don't tell nobody. And you're going, why would he say that? You know why you don't tell anybody? One, they're not ready to hear it yet. And by the way, timing is important to God. The timing of when you tell somebody and how you tell them is important to God. That's why a lot of people with bullhorns screaming at people go, they're rejecting God. No, they're rejecting you because your timing's off. See? You're not even thinking about timing. You're not thinking of God's timing or the Holy Spirit's timing. And he goes, it isn't time for you to tell anybody. And there's another reason is it isn't just they're not ready, you're not ready. Because you said the statement, Peter, but you don't get it. I got to tell you what the fine print is. I've got to tell you what it means to follow me. See, you're saying the right words, but you don't grasp it. And when you grasp it, you'll be ready, but you're not ready yet. And now he's about to give them the fine print as he is us. For some of us, we're going, yeah, I'm ready to follow, but we don't know what it means. We don't know what the cost is. And he's going, hey, before you make this commitment, count the cost. Here's what it means to follow me. Verse 31. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer. You want to circle something? This is the first time they kind of have heard this. Now, this is not the first time he said it. He said, I'm going to come, I'm going to die, that's why I came. And for most of us that know that he went to the cross, and we know historically he went to the cross, we go, oh yeah, that makes sense. To them, it didn't. Because right now, think about it, in their mind, right now, following Jesus means I'm a superstar. Following Jesus means I used to be a fisherman, a nobody from nowhere, like Zuna, sorry. A nobody from nowhere, right? And now all of a sudden, I'm in the biggest parts of Jerusalem, and everyone in the entire world is taking note of me. When I come in, I'm a superstar. So I don't know anything about, what are you talking about suffering? God is bringing his kingdom to earth. That's what they thought. And they had missed the whole thing about, well, no, he is bringing his kingdom, but first I'm going to die. And by the way, if you're my follower, you know what that means, right? So are you. This is the connotation. I don't know if you know that, but it's kind of like, this is what's going to happen to me. And by the way, if you're following, the same thing happens to you. Ooh, right? It's kind of like they're going, what are you talking about, suffering? We don't suffer. We do miracles. We make life better. We're happy. Stop talking about this negative stuff, right? The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law. And they're like, yeah, right now we're kind of popular. Yeah. But that's not where this is going. I want to be clear on where this is going. I want to be clear. This is not a little font. This is a big font. I want to make sure you get this is where it's going. And he must be killed, and after 3 days he'll rise again. And they are dumbfounded. They're like, huh? Let me tell you what happens next, verse 32. He spoke plainly about this. That's important. You know why I'm saying that? Because some Christians don't. Let's highlight the positive, and let's just not talk about the negative. You get it? And Jesus is going, I want to be clear because it's not just negative. This is the point. If you're going to be my follower, this is important for you to know. And he's ready to tell them more. And just about that time, Peter's sitting there as a verbal processor. Okay, I understand how this feels. And he's sitting there going, what are you doing? Right? He's watching the crowd. I understand because if you're a people person, you'll get this. You'll watch the crowd and you can kind of tell if they're with you. And he's looking at the crowd and Peter's going, the crowd ain't going to be with you. See, the disciples are all confused about this. And it's a good thing you're just talking to us. Because they're not, even the disciples are struggling with this one. Why are you talking about that death stuff? You've done it before. You need to knock it off. In fact, that's exactly what Peter does, right? And Peter took him aside. Go back. Peter took him aside and began to what? Rebuke him. Think of how stupid that is, just for a second. You'd have to be a verbal person to understand. You let it come out of your mouth, but later on you think about it and you're like, I can't believe you just rebuked. You just said who he was. I am Messiah, Son of the living God. And you just rebuked me? Who do you think you are? I spoke and the worlds came into existence. I know the beginning from the end, and you rebuked me? What an idiot. Okay. And I just changed your name to the Rock, you dummy, right? I mean, what's wrong with you? That's why he said, don't tell anybody yet. You're not ready to share the gospel because you don't even understand it because you think it's just pain-free, problem-free, and you are missing it, Peter. And Peter takes him aside and goes, hey, stop saying that, right? Why is he saying that? He's going, see these disciples? Look how confused they are. And if you don't stop it, you see that big crowd behind them? Those thousands of people that have left their houses and homes and they're following you because you're the Christ. They don't want to hear this. Shh. Knock it off. I know about the death and you keep talking about it, don't understand it, stop talking about it. Stop. Let me tell you how Jesus responds. Some of us think that's what it is, right? We've been taught name it and claim it and gab it and grab it, and that life is just a series of not suffering, and we don't want to talk about suffering, and if you speak suffering into your life, you get the picture. Nothing could be further from what Jesus himself is teaching. It's true. It's not just pain-free, problem-free, not just bad things happen and then it's bad. It's not. It's on purpose with a purpose. But when Jesus turned and he looked at his disciples, let me tell you how it goes. Peter's going, Jesus, come here. Knock that off. You're scaring these guys. Stop it. I don't know why you talk about that death stuff. You're Jesus. It ain't going to happen to you. I'm not going to let it happen to you. Get it? I'm the rock. Yeah, gotcha. Peter looks at him and he does what they teach you not to do in most leadership things. He doesn't take Peter aside alone. He doesn't get in the back room and say, let's discuss this and then we'll come out with a united front. What he says is, no, this is public. And by the way, I'm not your follower, Peter. You rebuke me, you don't rebuke me. I'm Jesus. You get the picture? And he's not being arrogant, he's being confident. And he goes, I need to be clear because Peter's just expressing what everybody else is thinking here. And that's why he does it publicly. And he says to Peter, he rebukes Peter. And what does he say? Get behind me, Satan. Tough, isn't it? And I think Peter just went, right? Because he was just, I'm the rock. I just said the words, and I'm the rock. And Jesus just said, you're Satan. No, he didn't say you're Satan. He said what you just said is not from God, it's from Satan. I know you're saying you care about me, but it's not that you care about me, Peter. You care about you. In fact, that's what he says, right? Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. You see, Peter, you are being a consumer. And I knew this was the problem. That's why I asked, who do people say I am? Who do you say I am? And you said the right words, but you don't grasp that there is something attached to that. Being my follower doesn't mean you're just a consumer. There's going to be times that it means you have to deny self. And you don't get it, Peter. Is you think it's pain-free, problem-free. And Peter's going, you're saying it too loud, right? There's a crowd out there. You're going to lose them if you don't stop saying this stuff. Oh, the crowd, Peter? Let's see what he does. Verse 34. Then he called the crowd, right? Peter's going, shh. Let's work this out amongst ourselves. Why don't you do this? Why don't you send Matthew out, let him tell some tax collector jokes? They'll think that's hysterical, right? I mean, he's got some good ones, right? Keep it clean, Matthew. Okay, you get the idea? And that's not what Jesus does. He's going, the crowd's going to hear you. Let's just talk about this amongst ourselves later. And Jesus goes, no. I don't need a secret room meeting. I know what I'm about. You don't. And they need to know. This is not about gathering a crowd of consumers. Hey, guys, everybody come in. I'm going to tell you what this is all about. That's what he does. And I think at that point, they're all like, whoa, right? And he says, hey, come on in, disciples and all. I want you to know today what you're signing up for. From now on, when this thing goes further, this is what it's going to be like. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves. Oh, not just deny themselves. And they're like, ooh, wow. These people came for a miracle. They didn't come to do something, right? They didn't come to serve. They came to be served. You get the idea? Take care of those consumers, Jesus. You're going to lose them. Yeah, I know. Not only do they need to deny themselves, they need to take up their cross. Let me tell you where I'm going. I'm going to the cross, and by default, I'm not talking theoretical. Your death will be the cross if you follow me. The same death I die, you will die if you follow me. That's what it means. And by the way, he's peering into their future. Several of them were crucified. His own followers, including Peter. He's talking not in theory, he's talking reality. Now, for us, it doesn't mean crucifixion usually. And I would have said for years, this verse applied to them and not us because in modern times, we don't face crucifixion. That's no longer true in some parts of our world. ISIS is now crucifying Christians. And we've seen it for the first time in modern times, horrible deaths like we saw back then. So maybe I can't say that anymore. But for the most part, we're not facing that. But denying self, we are. And we all know what it means to deny self, right? That we go, hey, there's something greater, that's why I deny myself. I'm going to do this because something better is at play. Like they pass the dessert tray around, they say, would you like dessert tonight? And you go, no, I'm going to deny myself. I'm trying to get life insurance, and I care about my numbers now. No, some of us don't know, right? We go, who cares? I'm just going to pay more, or whatever. Or we're driving in Newport News now, and they finally got Krispy Kreme back open, and it goes, hot now. And we go, oh, deny myself. And we go, no, I can't really, just one. No, just a dozen, whatever. But well, we know that's what it means to deny self for something better. Some of us know even more sacrificially for our kids. We'll do something for us that's hard so that they might have something better. And he's going, that's what I'm talking about. You must deny yourself, take up your cross. Now, understand for them, for us, cross is a piece of jewelry. For them, though, it was something they saw on a daily basis, so they knew what the cross was. We've never experienced the cross. We've never seen, I doubt anyone here has ever seen, other than on television, a public crucifixion, which is horrible. It is not sanitized. It is a horrible way. The body stays there for days as you watch it, and the humiliation and the horribleness of it is just the worst thing imaginable. And it is. And they did it very graphically, and the smells are just beyond what we can talk about. I could describe it, but it would be gross just to even talk about. They knew what it meant. That's why they're going, then who wants to follow? You see, they're realizing now that he's going, there is a price to following me. To go from here, if you want to go with me today, this is where it's going to lead. How many want to sign up? And they're all like, no, I came for the magic tricks. I didn't come for this. I didn't come for this. And he could tell he's losing them. So he goes on in verse 35, he says this, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Now he's trying to get them on the same page. See, he threw out and said, let me give you the principle, but to follow me, you're going to have to deny you. Eventually, our paths are not going to be, it benefits you to follow me. It's going to cost you. That we're not, eventually it's going to be, you want this, but this is what God desires, and you're going to have to make a choice whether you follow or not. Because I can tell you're struggling with it, because you're really thinking, hey, I'm going to lose this. And he goes, by the way, how many people are going to lose their life anyway? See? The death rate is 1 per person, and we will all make it. That's what he's saying. He's going, guess how many of you are going to die anyway? All of you. How many people are going to lose everything you're saving for today? How many people are going to lose every relationship in your life because you're going to die? Well, everybody. And they're like, oh, well, that kind of takes the edge off a little, right? I mean, you're going to suffer and die anyway. The rain rains on the righteous as well as the unrighteous alike. Just because you're unrighteous doesn't mean you're not going to die, doesn't mean you're not going to feel it. But whoever loses their life for me, you see it there? Maybe you need to underline it. Whoever loses their life for me and for the sake of the gospel will save it. You know what he's saying? If you follow me, you will lose your life on purpose with a purpose that will go beyond anything you can have. So my question is, I understand there's suffering, but is it worth it? In fact, that's the real question. He's going, hey, you're going to lose this anyway, right? So why not lose it for a good cause? And by the way, isn't it good following me? Isn't my teachings good? Isn't God blessing you even in this life? But it's not pain-free, problem-free. I just don't want you to be confused when suffering comes, because some Christians are confused. Like, I thought God was just going to make my life better, and when they suffer for the cause, they're going, I must be in the wrong. No. Suffering will happen. But when it happens, isn't it worth suffering for God rather than suffering for nothing and losing it anyway, is what he's saying. They're like, oh, good point. And he goes on, verse 36. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world but forfeit their soul? Ooh, never really thought of that, right? So what he's doing is, maybe you need to do this. You can close your eyes. We told him not to do it first service. Maybe you guys look a little tired. Don't close your eyes. Imagine, okay, imagine just for a minute the perfect life. What is it you want? Some people can't identify that. And by the way, how in the world can you hit it if you don't know what that life is, okay? By the way. Some of us want to be miserable. And can I tell you why? Because if we said, what would make you happy? You can't answer it. You just know what makes you miserable. That's why you're miserable. And you're always going to be miserable because you can't define what happiness is. But he's saying, if you had the perfect life, okay, think about it for just a minute. What if God would give you anything in this life? And he goes, here's the offer. You can have anything. What does that perfect life look like? Now, is it worth more than your soul? I never thought of that. It's one of those games, you ever played that where, would you want this or this, this or this? We do it a lot with teenagers. It's fun. You know what I'm talking about? Where we play this game and it's like, hey, if I could use your hands or your feet, or it's just stupid games like that. And so Jesus is saying, hey, let me ask you a question. The whole world, everything at your fingertips, all the money you want, all the stuff you want, but understand at the end of it, you're going to lose your eternal soul. Well, I don't know anything about soul. Yeah, but just think of it for a minute. If you have an eternal soul, would you give up your eternal soul for the perfect life? By the way, you're going to lose it, right? How many people would say, man, I know I'm going to suffer in this life, but I have all the money in the world, but tonight, fool, your soul is required of you, right? Remember that story? I don't know if some of you guys know that story. Some of you don't, but if you read the gospel account, you'll find there's a rich man that said, hey, I've stored up in my barns and I have the perfect life, and now finally I'm going to do it. And then God says to him, you fool, you've invested in the wrong thing. Tonight you're going to die, and you're never going to enjoy it. And by the way, your kids are going to squander your wealth. We find that from Solomon, who was the richest, wisest man who ever lived. And he said, what am I earning all this money for, to leave it to who? Because they're just going to squander it, and it means nothing. There is no satisfaction if you gain the whole world but lose your soul. And now Jesus is going, you're making my point for me, aren't you? Just now you're thinking in your mind, you're going, yeah, that makes sense. Because I could have all of this and lose that, and this is more important. You're starting to discover something about yourself. In verse 37, he says this. Or how can anyone give, what would anyone give in exchange for their soul? And you're going, yeah, that makes sense. I can see maybe it's making sense for you. They're suffering, but why not suffer with a cause, on purpose, with a purpose, instead of even getting, which you won't get, by the way, even the perfect life that you want to acquire. How many people are going to get that? None of us, right? That's why we're here. But what? But what? Would I give it in exchange for my soul? And he goes, you know what? You guys just discovered something. Your soul is worth more than everything else. Is that true? There's a blank there, and I don't want you to fill it in too quickly. I want you to think about it. Is my soul, my eternal soul that will go on forever, worth more than all of my stuff? And I think he would put it differently. He goes, you do understand, I'm God. Is your relationship, let's put it different than just a soul, because sometimes you're like, well, it's me. But is your relationship with God more important than anything else? You see, what Jesus is saying is, it's not just what's at the table, it's who's at the table. And he's saying, you want to be my follower, understand it will cost you, but I can tell for some of you, you're only following as long as I do magic tricks. And when they cease, you'll stop following, won't you? But here's the thing, even if you suffer, is your soul worth more than everything else? And he goes, you just discovered something, didn't you? You just discovered something about yourself, that your soul is more important than anything. Okay, here's how he ends. Verse 38, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with his holy angels. Now he's getting apocalyptic, see? Now it's getting real for them. Because he just laid down the gauntlet. He said, here's the price for following me. Now what are you going to decide? But understand this. At the end, I just want to be clear about how it'll be. When I come, maybe you've never seen me in this light. You saw me as a servant. You saw me as a hippie running around telling little self-help stuff and just being friendly and nice and all this kind of stuff. And we said, hey, now it's time to choose. Will you follow me or not? But understand this, if you choose not to follow me, when you get there, I'll deny you too. Is that harsh enough for you? Is that direct enough for you? In my glory with my heavenly angels. That's apocalyptic language, meaning at the end of time. Several times he speaks of when Christ returns, when God comes back, I will come in my heavenly glory and sit on my throne. And on that day, when you come before me, did you deny me? I'll deny you. In this world where it's hard, it's not easy to follow Jesus. That's tough, isn't it? Can I tell you what some people did that day? They went, we're out. We signed up for happiness. We signed up for self-help. We didn't sign up for following that, right? Being a true disciple. That's not us. We came when it was convenient. But if that's what you want to do and that's where you're going to go, I'm out. And some people decided to follow. Some people, though, struggled. And I want to take some of the edge off because I got a feeling for some of us, we're going, you know what, I've already made my choice. I've already messed up. Maybe that's you. And it's going, well, what about the people that messed up? What about the people that have denied him? What about if I decided I was an atheist and now I'm lost because I've denied him and now I can never know him again and it can never be corrected? Let me take the edge off. If you want to know what Jesus meant by what he said, watch what he did. So after this day, can I tell you something? The reason why he said don't tell anybody? They weren't ready yet. His apostles weren't ready. They said they're in, and several people walked away that day and never came back. The apostles say, we're all in. We'll go with you. We're with you. And on the day of his crucifixion, on the day they came and arrested him, can I tell you what happened? They struck the sheep, and the sheep scattered. They struck the shepherd, and the sheep scattered, right? They all left him alone. And Peter, never deny you, Lord. I'm with you all the way. I'm your closest follower. I'm the rock, right? Denies him not just once, but 3 times that day. That day when it was the defining moment where what he's talking about here, peering into the future, saying, I am the shepherd, and if you deny me, right? And Peter knew it, and he denies him. And somebody else asks him, Peter, do you know the Lord? And he knows what that means because they're gathering up his followers to go, hey, guess what? We got a cross right beside him for you. No thanks, right? I'm not his follower. And it was so bad that a middle-aged schoolgirl said, hey, I know you're his follower. You know how middle-aged, they're kind of combatant. Even though they're little, they kind of do that thing. And so she's like, yeah, no, you are his follower. And he curses, right? He curses to make sure she knows, I'm not his follower. And in that day, a piece of him died inside. I got a feeling somebody here today feels that. I walked away from it. I stopped following. I stopped believing in God. I don't believe in God anymore. That's Peter. And he shrank and he died. Can I tell you something? It doesn't end there. After Jesus died and he rose from the dead, Peter was nervous about being around. In fact, Peter went back to his old life. Do you know that? He went back to being a fisherman, obscurity. I'm not worthy to be your follower anymore. Until Jesus comes beside him on a beach and he says, Peter, I forgive you. That's the synopsis of what he did. He had a conversation with Peter and he goes, I know you're scared. I know you feel that. But Peter, I forgive you. And not only do I forgive you, but I have a purpose for you. You know what your job's going to be? You're going to be in charge of the whole church when I leave. I want you to be the rock that you thought you were. Now's the time. Now you're ready. See, now you know what it feels like. You don't believe in God. It isn't about you believing in God. You see, you thought it was about your prideful belief. It isn't. It's about God believing in you. See, somebody here today needed to hear that. See, somebody here today needed to hear, even after you've denied him, God comes to you, the atheist, the one that says, I don't believe in you. After everything you've done to me, God, I hate you. I can't stand you. I don't want you. And God comes to you and says, it isn't about you believing in me. It's about a God who believes in you and still loves you and calls you. You get it? And then you get a choice to say, will I respond to that? And he says, come be with me. I got a purpose for your life. And all of the suffering has a purpose. All of the suffering will one day make sense. And we have a choice. You get it? And he wants to do this for you. You get it? Okay. So here's what I want you to understand today. What is the cost? I want you to evaluate. This is a defining moment in our lives. And I want to make sure I explain it clearly because if I don't, you could really easily misunderstand what I'm saying. So let me be clear. The cost for following Jesus. The first thing is this. Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Okay? You can write it down if you want to. Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. You could very easily misunderstand and think that I said following Jesus has a cost and that's where it starts. And if you go there, then you'll think you're earning salvation and you're trying to be good enough to get to God, and none of us can. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, if you want a reference for it, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 says, it's for by grace we've been saved through faith, and that not of ourselves, it's a gift of God, not of works, so that no one can boast. You ever been to boastful church? I have. You ever seen Christians that forgot where they came from? It's a reminder for all of us. We all come the same way. We're all so horrible that it took Jesus dying on the cross to save us. So if you're terrible, you're awful, you think God could never forgive you for the things he did, he says, look at the cross of Jesus Christ. Is this enough to forgive you? Is this enough to restore you? Is this enough to take you to another place where you're able to follow me? Right? Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Somebody might need to hear that today. There's a God that loves you. There's a God that loves you right where you are. You don't have to change a thing. He still loves you. And too much to leave you there. And after you've done it, after you started to go, hey, I don't even believe right and behave right, but I'm going to start by believing in a God who saves me, and it costs me nothing. Can I tell you something? If there's ever been a consumerism, that's it. God comes at you on your needs, not his. And then he says, but I want you to have a better life. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to follow me. Now, let me tell you something about following Jesus. Following Jesus will cost you. After you've been saved and you know the God of this universe and you know Jesus Christ, then following Jesus will eventually cost you something. This is where people go wrong. I thought you said it's free. No, salvation is free. Following Jesus, though, Eventually, he's saying, you're going to come at a place where you're going to have to deny you to follow me. Eventually, it's something you want, and he goes, you have to deny you in order to do what God needs you to do. But he said, by the way, it's on purpose with a purpose. Is that worth it? And don't do it without knowing God. But once you know God, are you willing to do what God is calling you to do? Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Following Jesus will eventually cost us something. But refusing to follow Jesus will cost you more. And I'll be crystal clear. There has never been a time in my life that I refused to follow Jesus when I wish I hadn't. There's never been a time in my life where I've refused to follow Jesus, where I said no to God, that I didn't wish I could go back to that day and say, I wish I had said yes. And there's never been a time that I chose to follow Jesus that I ever wanted to go back to that day and say, I want to say no. Never. There's never been a time where following Jesus was the wrong thing. Never been a cost that's too much to follow Jesus. It's true. I'm not saying I've always done it. I'm saying, but that's the way it is. So I want you to think for a minute. In your life, God is now coming to you, and maybe you need to receive him as Savior because you never have, and maybe that's where you need to start, okay? And if that's you, that's fine. That's where you're at. But some of us have been doing this a while, and we have got the consumerism. We've got what God is offering to us, but we've never taken an additional step because we went, oh, but if I do that, it's going to be hard for me and my family. I want what's good for me. I want what's good for my kids. I want what's good for me. I want just what's easy for me. And he's going, yeah, but this is going to cost you. You're going to have to get involved. You're going to have to actually do something. And you're going, yeah, I think I'm out. That ain't me. I came when as long as it benefits me. And he's going, you're a consumer. You're not a follower. Because from here on out, to follow Jesus means you have to deny you sometimes to do it. Doesn't mean he doesn't bless us, but it does mean this. Sometimes we suffer for the cause. Sometimes we have to sacrifice self for the cause. But don't fool yourself. When you say no to it, this will determine whose you are. We had a situation recently in our church. The lady called me, or has been sharing with me, and she gave me permission to share this today, which is awesome. She's been following over the last few years. She had a death that led her to Christ, and she accepted the Lord as her Savior, and she started coming and started to learn what it means, and she started slowly starting to pick up the disciplines of the Christian faith and started to say, hey, I want to conform myself. And she came to the members class and she learned, because we don't talk about giving money much in here, but there we said, hey, this is what the Bible teaches, and she explored it for herself, and she said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start giving the way the Bible says to give. And she made a commitment. And I remember the Sunday, and she came to me, and we don't ever talk about giving, and we don't want to know how much you give. She didn't tell me any of that because I don't want to know. That's between you and God. But she said, I've committed to tithe. I've committed to do what the Lord's telling me to do. And I was like, that's awesome. Good for you, man. That's awesome. And then the very next week, her dog died. Now, you'd have to be a dog person. If you're not a dog person, I really don't understand you, okay? So, I'm sorry. But we have a lot of dog people here, and you'll understand how a devastating loss. She's already had one loss of a spouse, and now she lost a dog that's very close to her. You have to understand how hard that is for somebody. It's even closer sometimes than people, and if you're not a dog person, you don't get this, that God sometimes gives you something. The other thing about them is dogs don't talk, so they're really awesome in that way, right? And so to lose it was very difficult for this person, on top of which it cost her a lot of money, and she's like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to tithe. Now, she didn't talk to me about this. She just said, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, and then she said, you know, I got money in savings, and it's hard for me to remove it, but you know what? I've made this commitment. I'm going to do it. And she called me up, and I remember because I said, hey, I can't talk to you till tomorrow. And she said, no, you really need to call me because I got a story I need to share with you. She said, I committed to do this, and I was like, oh, man, she wants her money back. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we'll help you. You know, we got a benevolent fund. We'll help you with this and all this. No, you're missing it, John. I got a check in the mail the next week for the whole amount. It was more than what I'd even done. It was a check that was totally unexpected. I sold a house, and all of a sudden, I got more money back than I ever dreamed. She goes, you can't believe it. You can't outgive God, you know? And it increased her faith. But in that moment, you know what she knew? It wasn't about money then. It wasn't about that she sacrificed and then God did something for her, because sometimes it doesn't work out like that. But in that moment, here's what she learned: whose she is. Right? Not about bragging about giving, because I have no idea how much she gives. It's not about that. But it was about sharing a story that said, hey, I gave to God, not to get back, but because now I know I'm committed to God. And he does show up even in this life. And here's my question for you today. This might not be about money for you. And if money is a big issue for you and you're sitting there and you're going, I can't believe it, you're asking for money. I'm not asking for money. In fact, if that's your attitude, don't give until your attitude is different, because it doesn't count, okay? Really. I'm serious. But here's what I want to tell you. What is God impressing on you. When the moment comes and God says, in order to follow me, and you know it's God speaking to you because you've been following long enough to go, yeah, I know I need to do this, but it's going to cost me. Are you willing to take the next step and follow God where it's going to cost you, or are you going to shrink back and say, no, I'm out? If it's going to start costing me something, if I got to get involved, if I got to start doing something, then I'm out. And here's what I want to tell you, don't worry. Some people worry about this, like I'm worried about all the trajectories and all the things that can happen to me, and I need to be able to figure out if I can say yes to every one of these things. They're planning their own crucifixion and stuff. You're like, that probably won't happen to you. It's okay. You don't have to worry because God will be there. And here's what I think. If you know Jesus and you followed him so far, when the moment comes, you will do the right thing. I just want to make sure that you're clear that it's not bad that sometimes we suffer as a Christian on purpose. By the way, we're going to lose it all anyway, right? By the way, when I was a sinner, guess what? I still am a sinner. But when I wasn't saved, when I didn't know Christ, when I didn't follow Christ, I suffered then too. Did you know? A lot of it was my own making. Get it? But now to suffer on purpose sometimes, with a purpose, is awesome if you understand it. And I believe you'll do the right thing. But for some of you, here's what I know. Today is that moment, right? You've been faced with something, and it has been nagging at you for a while, and it's no coincidence that today we're talking about the very thing that you have to make a decision on, and you're going, yeah, I got a tough choice to make. And it's no coincidence that God's saying, hey, whose are you? Are you going to leave just going, hey, I just take what's free, and I'm just a consumer of God, or are you going to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to follow him, I'm going to do the difficult thing? Maybe it's an immoral relationship you need to end, that you know, hey, it just doesn't add up. I say I'm a Jesus follower, but this doesn't add up to God's word, and I've been living wrong long enough. And I understand it takes a while, right, before you believe right and before you behave right, but now to be a follower and say, I've been doing this a while, but I continue just to stay put and never take the next step. Maybe it's giving something. Maybe it's your time. Maybe it's to an individual. Maybe God's saying, hey, you got a lot, or maybe this is going to stretch you, and he's going, hey, I want you to take that and give it to them that needs it. Or maybe it's forgiveness. I need to give them forgiveness, and I've always held on to this, and I hate them, and I can't believe they did that, and today is the day that God's saying, you know what you got to do? You got to forgive. I got an addiction problem. I've got to get help for it. It's time for me to stop lying. It's time for me to come up here and pray with somebody and start the process of getting some help and hope because I can't do this by myself anymore. Maybe it's being part of a church. Maybe it's something as small as saying, hey, I need to sign up to serve. Right? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I do know this. You got a choice, and it's a defining moment. And to say no now, what happens? I want you to think about a story. What story do you want to tell? The story where you say, I've chosen to follow Jesus, or the story where the cost is too much to follow Jesus? Can I tell you, on this day, several of them decided we're not following anymore. They walked away and never came back. They said, you know what? We liked you when you helped us. We liked you when you said all those nice things. We didn't like you when you talked about the cost, and we're out. And several years later, when Jesus died on the cross and he rose from the dead, and they started to see them appearing before everybody that's his true followers, and they said, what would they have given to go back to that day and said, I wish we had followed? Right? I doubt anybody on that day when he rose from the dead and on the day of Pentecost when the power of the Holy Spirit filled them and they had a purposeful life. And I bet, and here's what I know from the reading of the apostles, he allowed them to write the Holy Scriptures, which is just awesome. They had many mistakes, but here's what I know. I bet there's not one of them at the end of the gospel accounts that would say, you know what? I wish we had said no to Jesus on that day. I wish we had walked away and not paid the price. And even though we suffered for the cause, everything about that is worth it. And today, our names are on the gates of heaven as people enter into it. Get the picture? Eternal value. We learned that day that following Jesus, there is no cost that's too much. And we learned that there isn't anything worth rejecting him for. So today is a defining moment. Whose are you? What story do you want told? Before we leave today, I don't know what God's saying to you, so I don't dream of telling you. I want to just give you one tangible way to respond, okay? We're having a brand new series on September 11th, But God Changes Everything. And I know for some of us, if you're brand new, hey, look, I understand. You're going, hey, I'm not inviting anybody. I'm getting to know this myself. That's not for you, okay? But for some of you, you've been here a while, and you've sat here a while, And you've listened to us for a while, but you've never taken a step where you went, hey, I'm going to get involved. Hey, I know somebody needs that, but yeah, I don't really want to do that because it's going to mess up my schedule. It's going to mess up my life. I'm busy. I got things to do. And what I want to tell you about this thing, about the soul being greater than things, it isn't just about your soul. It's about other people's soul too. And we have the opportunity here today. We have postcards. And all we're asking to do is this. 3 people, okay? 3 postcards. 3 people that you know. Do you know 3 people that don't know Christ? If you don't, I can introduce you to them, right? Just watch the news. There's lots of them, right? Who do you know that needs, but God changes everything? And we're asking you today to mail these out. And some of you are going to go, yeah, I forgot to bring those addresses, so I'm not going to be able to do it. I don't want you to use that as an excuse. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to fill it out anyway today. There's 3 of these in your outline, and then take it home and mail it, but write them now. Because here's what I know. You're going to walk out those doors, and you're going to use the same excuse, and Satan is going to get behind me, Satan. And if you want to say it, you believe in this. Because here's what I know. 83% of people said they'll come if you invite them. 100% of people said they won't come if you don't invite them because they don't know about it. They don't know God can change everything. They don't know about that. And what I want you to visualize just for a minute is fast forwarding how important this could be for somebody's life. To be here and hear a message that God could change them no matter how much they've been abused, no matter how much they've abused other people, no matter how hurt they are, we're going to share over a series of messages how God can change their life and how God can love them right where they are and too much to leave them there. See, we're not very profound, same message. But here's what I know, it could change somebody's life, but it won't if they're not here. So here's what I want you to think about. At the end, Jesus says, hey, I will come in my glory. And if you read Matthew 25, you will see it. I will come and I will sit on the throne in my heavenly glory, and I will judge those that have chosen to follow me. I will say, come on in to heaven and receive your reward. And those that choose to reject me, I will say, depart into everlasting destruction where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. If you think I'm making this up, that's a direct quote from Jesus Christ himself. And the thing that hangs in the balance is the church that says, I left one thing for the person to know me. You know what it is? The church. Not the building, the people. To invite them. Another place he talks about it like a banquet, and he says, go out in the highways and the byways and compel them to come in. That's what we're talking about here, see? Compelling them. Not yelling at them, compelling them. Come sit. Jesus loves you. Jesus wants to know you. He could have chose anything else to reach people, but he chose the church. And it's our job. Now visualize that day as he separates the wheats from the tares, those that can come in and those that can't, those that have chosen him and those that can't. And imagine your friend standing there and saying, you knew this? And you didn't tell me? You're a Christ follower and you kept it to yourself? Yeah, I was busy. Yeah, it was inconvenient. Yeah, I didn't want you to make fun of me. Yeah, I didn't want to get involved. Yeah, your life was kind of messed up. I didn't think you'd really like that. I thought it might offend you. You get the picture? That's a horrible day, isn't it? Now rewind and say, maybe on this day you said, you know what? I'm going to take a step of faith. I'm going to write down their name. I'm going to write them a card, and I don't know if it's going to do anything, but they're going to get it in their hand, and they're going to read a personal note from me. Not the whole plan of salvation. That's why we only gave you a little bit of room here. See? They don't want to read all that stuff, trust me. I want you to come celebrate with us. I want you to come. I want you to hear this message. I thought about you. I'm praying for you. Please come. I'll meet you here. I'll take you to lunch. I'll call you this week. And what? And on the day that Jesus Christ comes, he looks at you, and standing beside you is that person. Can you imagine? But God can change everything. You get it? And on that day, he goes, oh, you want to know what your crown is, don't you? And he goes, it's not a piece of tin. It's right there. Great is your reward. A defining moment. Get it? Whose are you? Salvation is free. It costs you nothing. Oh, you may indeed be saved. My question is, will you take the next step and follow? It isn't just about your soul. Get it? It isn't just about our soul. When he says that soul is greater, it means their soul too. And if you are allowed to do that, it's not you that saves them, but God lets us be part. Will you be part? 3 cards that could change a life. You need more. We got tons, okay? Take 30, okay? Do however many you want. But here's what I know. If we'll invite them, they will come. And I believe God could change everything. You believe that?